African proverb says the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel the warmth. What time in your life have you been closest to starting the fire? Wife was a senior staff for a local science fiction convention. Not only was she an unpaid volunteer, she had to take a vacation day off work and pay for her hotel room and parking. On the morning that the convention started, she was setting up the first of the 3 rooms. She was responsible for manual labor, moving tables, setting up shelves and loading them with stuff, and somebody came in, took her ID badge off her desk, and brought it to the convention's lost and found. Convention LF lady told wife that lost badges have a $5 fee to get them back. Wife looked at the badge, looked at her, and said, "Keep it. I'm going home. Have a nice convention." Wife was about 25 feet down the hall when LF lady caught up to her and returned her badge. I was raised in a cult. There were 11 kids, with 4 moms, and the leader had really convinced our moms that he was the Archangel Michael. I tried to run away over and over in my late teenage years, hiking across the desert in the dark to get to the highway, where I would try to hitch a ride. Every single time, well-intentioned truckers called the police to report a little girl walking along the highway with her thumb out. I am short, and I had been malnourished my entire childhood, so even after I turned 18, I was underdeveloped and couldn't convince anyone I was an adult. Michael always called me in as a runaway and the cops would take me back. The last time, I was 20, and I felt so hopeless when I saw the police lights. I thought very seriously about trying to attack the officer with my knife that I always brought in case I was picked up by a crazy person. I knew I was too small and weak to actually hurt the officer, but he would be obliged to arrest me and send me to jail. It was the only way out I could think of. I had a co-worker at a non-commission-based retail job where a co-worker would repeatedly sabotage my sales so she could get a lot of credit apps and a high GSP. AVGR sales. She would overhear my pitch for cards required, and then lie to the customer so they would apply. I would have to try and rectify what she said while she hovered over me. She did many other questionable things, and I reported her multiple times, as did my co-workers and customers. Now, one time I got lucky and an 18-yo kid came in. "Yo, buy the most expensive desktop we have on display. $2.5K. She saw me do this sale, but I needed a manager to approve a tiny discount, but my radio was dead. Co-worker was watching me the entire time, so I asked if she'd call for the MGR. She stone cold ignores me. I go for the MGR, she prints out paperwork on the computer and tries to sell it to "Hi monsieur." When I return, she literally yells at me in front of the customer to give her the sale. BC she worked too. I ignored her and didn't give her the sale. When I reported this, as did the customer, he was mortified. I was literally told by my boss, "Ignore when she does that. She's a middle child, so she does stuff like that." I was tired of the stupid lack of action, so I filed an HR complaint regarding her, and 5 of my managers for not addressing it. They all got reamed for it. Only one is still in a management position. The rest were eventually demoted or laid off. Dumped at the doorstep of a youth shelter after my mum was hospitalized and dad was in prison. I wasn't a super bright teenager, but had enough sense to spend my last $20 on pepper spray and padlocks for my stuff. Predictably, people's stuff went missing all the time. I could write an essay on the issues in the public welfare system, ranging from the macro level, lack of funding, to the micro level, incompetent or burnt-out staff. There was violence, substance use, and sexual assault in crisis accommodation. But what bothers me 10 years later is the sheer stupidity of some adults who are meant to guide at-risk teenagers. I would ask my social worker questions like, are there places which can help me with food this week? How do I write a resume? And that social worker would vaguely shrug and offer relaxation techniques and mindfulness strategies. Look, 3 people got arrested at this shelter last week. No amount of relaxation techniques are going to calm me down. I'm guilty of doing stupid and irresponsible things as a teenager, but eventually finished high school and then 3 university degrees. I actually work for the same system that I was and am disappointed in. And there are so many practical resources available. They're underutilized because staff don't even know they're out there. If I had just a single adult to help me with the most simple tasks as a kid, it would have been so much easier. When you're a kid, you just don't know how university loan applications, taxes, budgeting, etc. works. Or at least I didn't. And everybody assumes that you do, because they do. Like I had no idea that in my country, the Department of Housing can pay for your rental bond. I stayed in a homeless shelter for an extra 1 to 2 months to save up $900 to pay for the bond of a shitty apartment. Extra months of broken sleep, men trying to pick the lock to my door, residents hyped up on ice. Last year there was a 16-year-old girl on the train, having a meltdown and making a public scene. She was clearly drunk and people were avoiding her. She started screaming that she missed her period and does anybody want to pay for her termination. She phrased it as a joke or a way to get money, which I did not give. But I guess she repeated it enough that I wondered if it was true. We got to talking and I referred her to a social service, downloaded a list of resources in her catchment area, and saved links and forms on her phone about how to arrange her own healthcare cards since she's over 15, so that she can visit a bulk billing GP on her own and get tested. In my country, the P-test from a pharmacy is about $15, but a pregnancy blood test ordered by your GP is free. We discussed different options that her GP might outline and other things that might be helpful. I know as well as anyone else that it's not always that straightforward, especially with 30 patients in your caseload and juggling them with a million other priorities. But in the biopsychosocial framework of health, where biological, psychological, and social factors are proposed to impact physical and mental health, we severely underestimate the impact of social circumstances. We let these kids down all the time, and it's preventable. When I was a kid, my dad used to beat on me pretty often. When he was sober, I usually did something to deserved. When he wasn't, it was just go time. One night, I was 14, he got drunk and when I got home from a girlfriend's place he cornered me and put a revolver to my head. He told me how worthless I was and that he would be doing me a favor by killing me. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I just waited for him to pull the trigger. He didn't. He left my room and left the revolver on my dresser as he walked out. I took the revolver and went out. I walked around my hometown, sat by the river and thought about all the ways I could get back at him for all the misery he caused my mother, sister, and I. I also considered doing the old Kurt Cobain, but that's not relevant. I took the weapon apart and threw its pieces in the river. No one's asked me about the gun since. It's probably still there. Edit. Holy shit, that blew up. Thanks for all the upvotes and awards, everyone. I used to work in fast food, and was the only person in the store that didn't smoke. Everyone else got to take a break to smoke, but since I didn't smoke, I wasn't allowed to. Eventually, I spoke to the owner about it and was rebuffed. So I went over their heads to the company board. Owner got his ass chewed out for rebuffing me, and I wound up getting a huge bonus my next paycheck. But when they discovered I reported them, I got fired immediately. Turns out they'd been violating company policy in food prep and storage. So I filed another report to corporate. Store got shut down for months and my former boss got fined 6 figures. I can absolutely attest to being around people who were love-starved and then subsequently self-sabotaging or otherwise destructive. In a softer sense, if I have felt rejected, I have felt peace in sort of burning bridges to find myself. When I had been bullied constantly in 7th grade by 3 different groups of kids, and the school showed so little interest in helping me, I was physically bullied, verbally mocked, humiliated in front of the other kids, and I was battered. When I finally took my mum's advice to make a scene the next time someone started throwing things at me, I did it. We were outside that day for PE, and while we were all sitting in lines at the start of class, a kid in the line next to me started throwing pebbles at me. I ignored it for a moment, then when he kept going I yelled at him to stop. I didn't care that people were staring, I wanted them to see that this average height, able-bodied boy was throwing things at me. A very small and disabled girl. The teacher came over and asked what happened. Kid told him they were only pebbles, he wasn't hurting me. The teacher agreed with him and told me if I ever disrupted his class like that again I was getting detention. I don't know what it is about some teachers, but the second they get put in charge of more than one child they become absolutely blind to any kind of bullying. And if it gets pointed out to them, they think that particular incident exists in a vacuum and couldn't possibly be a sign of anything worse. I was 11 years old and suicidal because I felt so incredibly powerless. That teacher only solidified that feeling. I didn't grow up with the best family. There was a long period of time where there was constant fighting, and things often went too far. I didn't feel safe in many different ways. It all culminated to a point when I was 17, disowned, and about to get kicked out. But my vindictive, defensive actions in the past made my mother know that kicking me out wasn't a good idea. I know the only reason I could have a roof over my head was because my mom isn't a citizen, and she knew I would have reported her for the crime of child abuse, which did happen, which would have put her residency in jeopardy. So, I guess I had to threaten to burn the village in order to feel the warmth of safety. Edit. A lot of people are assuming my mother is illegal, but she's not. I'm not exactly sure the mechanism through which she can stay in the United States. But she married my dad, American, and they got divorced. She can live and work here, but she doesn't have the full protection of the government like me. My family doesn't know that I've hit it big in my industry. The industry they said that you'd need superhuman talent or a lot of luck to make it in. I'm getting my finances and the logistics in order, and next week I'm moving out unexpectedly. The guys I've hired to move what few possessions I'm taking with me arrive sometime in the morning, and my flight leaves in the afternoon. I'll leave a letter explaining that I haven't harmed myself, but they are not likely to see me for a long time. I've got my own phone on my own plan, a plane ticket, and a place lined up on the other side of the country. My family won't take it well since they thrive on control and conflict, and I expect the whole family to implode from finger-pointing and drama whoring once I'm gone. The church group of churches, pseudo-cult I grew up in was very much this way. Didn't go to the right school? Shun. Didn't send your kids to the Bible summer camp? Shun. Your kid, spouse, family member sinned in a public way? Shun. Not a married 20-something with 3 kids and actively a leader. Shun. Took me 20 years to see through the bullshit, and another 7 to finally truly feel free. I'd burn all that shit to the ground for the hell they put every person through. Edit. For those asking, I grew up in the Churches of Christ, a fundamentalist group mostly in the southeastern U.S. Very untwined history with Mormonism though, we actually influenced him a bit. Look up Sidney Rigdon and Alexander Campbell if you want the Cliff Notes. Grew up with an incredibly privileged but emotionally abusive family. I never really fit in. They would frequently gaslight me with so much, but one that made me feel like I was going crazy was that they all hated each other but would act like I was the only one to fight with anyone else and band together in that. I've moved out now, but there were many nights when I felt like I was going crazy and that I could burn that house down and not look back. Glad I didn't though. Always a better way out. Edit. Wow, not a huge Redditor. First comment I've had with any real engagement. It's nice to hear there's other people who've dealt with the same stuff and still surviving as well. Nice to know peeps aren't alone in it. Stay strong. Happy living. Working in public accounting as an auditor. 65+ hour weeks. Getting yelled at by clients for things that aren't your fault. Getting chewed out by your manager for being under budgeted hours for a client. Staying in hotels 5 days a week during busy season. Eating poorly because you never had time to cook. Let's just say one of the best days of my life was when I got laid off from that place, which opened the door for a great opportunity with none of the issues listed above.